Hi, this is Mike over at Christ Hospital with Clinical Informatics. Going to talk today about the anesthesia intraoperative medical record keeping. So far, I've opened up the training domain for this. I have changed our start date to March 1st, and I've just left the end date to 10/2. The reason why for March 1st, that is the time that we've entered in our fake patients. As you can see that there is multiple patients already on here that have been checked in, which is the first column. Second column on here is record created. If they have a check mark on here, that means a record has been created in the OR. If they do not have a check mark, it has not been opened by the anesthesiologist. The check mark on the beginning is checked off when it is opened up in day surgery or either in the holding room. Right now we are defaulted to CMC main, and you will see all the patients that are here for the schedule. If you open up the intraoperative schedule in the OR, for example, if you are in room 4, it will just show the scheduled cases for room 4. If you open up the schedule anywhere else, for example in PACU, it's going to show all of the scheduled cases for that day. So right now we are defaulted to CMC main. If you were in OB, you would need to change your location by hitting the binoculars and change in location to CMC OB. If you are in the GI lab, you would need to do the same and change your location to CMC GI. But for right now, we're going to open up a fake patient in the OR main. I'm going to stretch this out so we can see the patient's name a little bit clearer, and I'm going to choose patient 80. You could either one-click and OK or double-click to open up the patient. You will get this verification window to make sure that you definitely have the right patient, the right room, right surgeon, correct procedure, another verification purpose. If this is all correct, you could hit your check mark. Takes a little time to open up the case. If you did not see your patient's name on the main schedule before you opened up, please call the front desk or let the RN circulator know that you do not have that patient on your list. So now that we are opened up, you see this window right here. You will not get this window opened up when you are in the main OR. You will only get this window when you are in GI or in OB, because you need to associate those certain monitors and certain machines. You will also get this window when you are in PACU recovery, but you do not need to associate any monitors and or machines in that area. So for this purpose, let's just hit cancel. So first thing that you do notice is that the patient's name is in the background. And our fake patient here is 8 CMC Anis. Yellow line here is our present line for the patient. First thing you would always want to do is set a macro for this patient. And setting a macro is basically your to-do list for this patient's scheduled case. So we're going to go to the macro section. It does have a variety of macros on here, including general, blocks, OB, pediatric. There is many more macros in the live version, but right now we are in the train, so we will just work with the ones that we have here. For this purpose, I'm going to use the basic case ETT macro. Click on there once. I'm going to maximize this window so you can see what the macro is involved. First thing you do notice that on top here is that you have your fluids, and it is checked off execute for LR. Everything else on here is a to-do for the rest of the case. And let me scroll down and show you that we also do have our monitors and our gases on here. But these are to execute immediately, so those could immediately start recording the patient's vitals and or recording gases. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. And let's just say, for an example, if we knew that our patient was not on LR, they were on 0.9, we'll hit the 0.9 execute and then uncheck for LR. Most of the time, you most likely will just bypass the screen, but if you are interested in changing any details here before the case starts, you can by hitting this icon over here in the edit section. We will execute now the macro / to-do list. You could see that on the bottom here that I have my macro dropped. And I'm just going to maximize the screen so you can see some more area down here. So the macro included starts recording gases. It talked about our 0.9 right here, our monitors, and then also we need to address our estimated blood loss and urine output before the end of the case. Over here you will see some orange boxes in our training domain. It is looking for some kind of vital statistics from either the Philips monitor or the anesthesia machine. But since we do not have anything hooked up to this training domain, it will not pull in anything, just pulling in orange boxes. Over here on the bottom section, this is where we're going to be filling out forms to be placed throughout the case, and those will include many of our to-do lists on our top left. Our icons on our top left are one way that we could enter or access data, or we could also access that same data on the bottom left corner here too. But let's just go ahead and take care of our patient and have a normal case that we need to fill out our intraoperative event forms. So let's just say, for an example, our patient did enter the room at 15:25. We dropped off our macro so we can immediately start recording blood pressures and or gases. We've taken care of our patient. Patient's been intubated. Monitors are on. We are able to start charting on our patient. So we're going to pay attention over to our to-do list. Anesthesia start time will be obviously the start time that the patient entered the room. One way that we could bring the anesthesia start time to our record is to click on the anesthesia start time and drag it over. Anesthesia start time, let's say, is 15:25, and then we get an alert saying that our anesthesia start time has been set. You will also see an icon close in proximity, well, should be the exact same time as your anesthesia start time from the nurse's charting purposes. It'll have a door that is open, and it just shows that the nurse has charted the anesthesia start time, which is also the in OR time. Next on our to-do list is to reminder to add personnel. The reminders on our to-do list are non-functional forms. I will show you what it looks like if you try to open this form up. This is our edit pencil. There is nothing that you could fill out in this form. So I'm going to hit cancel. To add personnel, best way that I suggest is personnel on the bottom left tab. You can see that it's broken down into 3 different categories: anesthesiologists, residents, and CRNAs. For this purpose, I'm going to do an anesthesiologist, and I'm going to use our fake anesthesiologist CMC SimLab 1. I'm going to take CMC SimLab 1 and drag that over into our start time. And then you can see that the line is shown horizontally, that we are still present for this case. So we could go ahead and delete our personnel. Next on our to-do list is our anesthesia checklist. You might see that some of the title names have been squished over, so you could always bring this over and see what actually the title of this form is called. Anesthesia checklist, one click on there, and to fill that out, we would hit our edit button. You could see that on our macro that we have filled out some of this form out already for you ahead of time, which is the checklist, which includes the ID confirmed, machine checked, O2 available, AMBU available, suction, temperature probe, emergency medications. But the one thing that you need to pay attention to on here is that the red asterisks are mandatory fields on this form. Antibiotic given by anesthesia, yes. Beta blocker taken, yes. This does not mean that what kind of antibiotic was given or an antibiotic was given at a certain time. It's just saying that you have given an antibiotic, and we would need to document the antibiotic in a different format within this chart. You can see on the bottom here that there is 2 functioning buttons, the execute and OK. If we hit execute, it's going to immediately bring it to our chart to the present time. If we hit OK, it is still going to leave it into our to-do list. So we still need to bring this anesthesia checklist over onto our chart. 2 ways we could do that. We could either drag and drop it over. we could hit the execute button, or also a third way, if we double click on the anesthesia checklist, it'll immediately bring it over to our present time. Next on our to-do list is our supervisor attestation. Since we are in this training domain and we are just mainly purposing on an attending only case, the supervisor attestation would be for residents and or CRNAs. I will show you what this form looks like. It does have on here a lot of pre-filled out details, but majority of the time that we always like to say that the supervisor is present for and immediately available throughout the case. So we could go ahead and fill this out, but this would be a form that the CRNAs and or residents would fill out. But let me just go ahead and show you what it looks like when we do put it onto our chart. I will execute on there, and that will immediately put it to our present time. As an attending's responsibility, you need to sign the attestation form. So if we could right click, sign supervisor attestation, and then this is where we would go ahead and put in your login. And then you could see that a double S for signature is placed on this attestation form. Next on our to-do list is patient positioning. We are going to go ahead and fill that out with our edit form. We do have some pre-filled out details on here, but if you did need to click on any other information, you could go ahead and click, or you could unclick that information. You could also see that there is an other section on each line. If you did click on other, a red asterisk comes up, and it is mandatory that you do need to place a comment section on there. Also, there is a comment section on all forms if you did need to place any other comments for the whole form. And then you could go ahead and hit execute for this form, and it will immediately place it onto your chart. A little bit difficult to read, but it is placed on the chart here. Next on here is we have a reminder to document CV rhythm. It is definitely a reminder, not a functioning form, so we would have to delete this form. And then here is the CV rhythm anesthesia. On our form right here, it is only showing values on the 0s and the 5s on the front face. So if I click on 1515 here for CV rhythm, drop down value here, and I could put on sinus, OK, and it'll show my sinus rhythm there. This values are checked every 5 minutes for within your charting. So if I wanted to go to 1520, immediately has sinus since that was the last value that I placed, has 1520, and hit OK. You could do this throughout the chart. It is a quicker way to add your CV rhythm. If you unfortunately clicked on an area that is not a 0 or a 5, as you could see, I clicked on 1529, I hit OK. It does not immediately show on our front face view. It shows a gray circle here. And the reason why for only placing these values on 0s and 5s is so your chart does not get bulked up and unable to read if you did place something every minute. Next item on our to-do list that we could address is the existing IV peripheral. This is possibly if you're receiving a patient from day surgery and or the holding room and you needed to address a pre-existing IV. You could go ahead and hit your edit form. You could see that the mandatory fields on this is asking for either right, left, hand, wrist, etc. Also, if you could place the size of this peripheral IV and then address it either functioning or non-functional. Execute will immediately place it onto our chart. IV peripheral, I'll show you what this form looks like. This is if you were placing a peripheral IV within the OR. If you did not need to place that, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK or cancel. And then I'm going to remove this from our chart since we did not place an IV within this OR. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of this to-do list. and there is the tracheal intubation. The tracheal intubation in our training domain does unfortunately move it down to the lower section, but this tracheal intubation will be much higher in your to-do list since it is a high priority item that you'll be filling out. One click on the tracheal intubation, edit form. You can see we do have our couple pre-filled items on here, but one thing to pay attention to is the airway and the ET tube do have red asterisks, so these are mandatory fields. Taped at, if you click on once, and then we also could place on here your value. If I go to ET tube, if I click on standard oral, and now I could fill out my size, my ET tube, and then other applicable forms that you would like to fill out here for your tracheal intubation. Intubating devices, Mac and or Millers. If you clicked on Mac, size of your blade, you could fill out that on the side here also. Once you are okay with everything that you have filled out to this form, you could hit execute, and that places that immediately onto your chart. Let me scroll up to the top of our medications. We can start addressing our medications for this case. Medications on here do have some predetermined details that could be highly suggested to use, or if you're definitely wanting to change those details, one click on here, use your edit form. You can see that it has a new on here since this medication has not been placed yet. It has the concentration. This is not to be changed because this is from the manufacturer. As you can see, 1:1 on here for the concentration. Dose amount on here, I'm going to change this to 2, and it changes their volume immediately. I could hit execute, and it will immediately place it on my chart. Or if I hit OK, I could drag and drop this medication to where I actually did give this medication at. I'm going to carry it over and say I was given this medication at 15:30. Now you can see that the medication screen window has started populating for other medications to be placed. If I did want to modify this medication, if I say, like the example, if I actually did give 3 at this one time, you would need to right click on the orange circle, and this is where you would have your modify or remove. So if I click on modify, and I'll change my dose amount to 3, and I could hit OK. Changes my dose amount to 3, and then you could see it over here in the column that at 3, keep my running volume dose. Anywhere else that you wanted to give an additional dose of this medication, if I gave a dose 5 minutes later, it will default to the time, it will default to the last medication dose that I gave. So all you would have to do is hit OK, brings in another 3 milligrams, and then keeps my 6 running time dose up here. I'm going to go over a couple more medications just for examples. And Ceph, if I would like to change our dose on here, I could change this to 2,000, and then execute that, and it immediately drops it onto my chart. Let's talk about some infusions for the medications. So propofol 500, I click on this, hit my edit button, and you could see on the top here that it is infusion. You could also change it to bolus if you're interested, but let's talk about the infusion for here. So for infusion, dose rate, whatever be applicable for your patient. Right now in our training domain, you will see the weight is required. You might get this alert into our live domain. Possible reasons are this is because the information for med dosing weight has not been entered, and that can be entered immediately at that time. So I'm going to hit OK on here. And the OK still leaves it over into my to-do list. I could carry this propofol infusion over to the time when I started my propofol infusion. And as you can see, it looks a little different than my boluses. Green is when it started, and the orange is the continuous infusion at that time. We will get our total volume in infusion once we finalize our case. I'm going to address the fluids for our 0.9 right now. Since at the beginning of the case we did execute 0.9 to be on our chart, but we want to talk about how much we received with this patient's chart and when we had the patient enter the OR. So we entered the OR at this time right here. I'm going to go ahead and right click, add sodium 0.9, and then bag volume is at the top. Most likely you came over with the patient that had less than 1,000, since maybe they were running with an IV already. For this purpose, I'm just going to go ahead and put 800 milliliters and hit start bag. So start bag at this time shows green, and then the orange is just showing the duration during this time. If I did have another 0.9 that I needed to start and this one already finished, an easy way to start your next bag, you could right click anywhere where your next bag is started, start next bag. But the one thing that you need to be careful about is that it's starting its next bag, which the 800 would be the volume infusion, since that was 800 of what we had from our previous bag. So to modify that, we would right click, modify, and change our bag volume up here to 1,000 and hit OK. Your gases for your machines would be pulling over. If you were on an Apollo machine, it would be pulling over all of your information. Just be cautious if you are on a non-Apollo machine that there would be certain items that would not be pulling over immediately. I'm going to go ahead and address our to-do list. Since these are only the medications that I'm going to give for this case, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning up my to-do list. You need to have your to-do list fully cleaned up before you finalize your case. So if I just click on our top med, I hit our X and just go down the line for all the medications that I did not give. Now next I'm going to address the warming. So one click on warming and edit. This talks about any upper body bear huggers. If I gave a fluid warmer or any kind of blankets for this patient. Go ahead and execute this. Temperature probe. I'm going to show you an example that happens quite often. If I double click on the temperature probe, it immediately sends it over onto my chart. But you have not filled out any information, so to go ahead and change that information, you could go ahead and right click, modify, and this is when you could put in your information for your temperature probe. More medications possibly given for this case, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of these medications. We do have a reminder on here for enter PACU orders. I will go over this in another video, but you would enter your PACU orders onto this patient's chart, which would bring you into the anesthesia M page and use your anesthesia power plans. Let me go ahead and remove this reminder. So right now we have 3 left on our to-do list: emergence, post-op transfer of care, and anesthesia end time. Emergence would be filled out in the OR. Unless if this patient was being extubated in recovery, you could go ahead and fill this out in recovery. So we are finished with our case, but I just want to do a little more information on some tricks on this actual case for the troubleshooting for vitals and changing your monitors. Up top here on the document, value. I'm going to maximize this screen here. This is defaulted to initially every 5 minutes to see what information is pulling over onto our chart. I enter these sinus manually on our other screen, but as you could see on here, heart rate 1515. This would be pulling over automatically through your Philips monitor. But let's just say, for example, if you had 180 on here and 1520, you had 95. You wanted to go back into your maintain monitor values where we are now, and you wanted to manually change this 180 because this is not an accurate vital sign. So just how I just entered these two, all you have to do is double click and then change these manually. There might be some times when your Philips monitor has not brought over your vital signs completely. Couple tricks that we like to teach is highlighting your top left corner here and then hitting your pull, and then this will pull over your vital signs if your macros were set properly and if your Philips machine had the proper monitors placed. And then you would hit chart. This would chart these vital signs over onto your front screen. Let me hit OK, and I could show you that these two vitals that I place are actually on our screen right now. Let me go back to that same screen, document, value. Right now it is defaulted to 5, but you can change it to intervals of 1 minute, and you can see that it is spaced out every minute for this purpose. Another screen that you might get more familiar with is on document, monitor, which also has a quick F2 function. Let me maximize this screen for you. Our macro has initially set all these selected parameters on here on the right side. On our left side of our screen here are available parameters. If there is a reason that you have a parameter on your Philips screen that has your A line listed as an AO, and then you have your selected parameter as an A line, your Philips monitor is going to be trying to find the AO, which it is not listed as a selected parameter. So that could be one error why some vital signs are not being pulled over. A solution to this problem is of either changing your Philips monitor to A line, but then you'd be missing that information that is pulling over from AO. So what we suggest is clicking on the AO and then moving that over, and then you would have that vital sign pulled over. To pull over that information that was not brought over because it was labeled improperly on the Philips monitor, you would go back to your document, value, top left corner, pull values, and that's when you would see your AO vital signs pulled over. Couple other information I want to talk about is if you needed to change providers during the case, what you would need to do is task and change user, and then the purple sign-in box would come up and you would have the new provider sign in their information, changes over their title on the bottom to have their name displayed here, but definitely just make sure that you put the new provider in here for personnel. Charting mode on our top right here, let me show you this. We click on charting mode, brings us to another side of our screen for information. I'm going to bring down my cursor to the top left here, and you can see this hand does come alive. I carry over this window and it brings over to the screen for all the other vital signs and information that was brought over. So initially when I said that vital signs were only showed on the 0s and the 5 on our other screen, the charting mode section will show everything per minute. To get back to your screen, you hit charting mode. A couple other information I want to talk about is on your monitor's banner bar here. It does have ASA class type. ASA class type is a requirement for your intraoperative and pre-op. You could change your ASA class on here. ASA is also a requirement on your pre-op documentation. If your pre-op evaluation is done before your intraoperative is started, it will bring it over onto the intraoperative. If you do your pre-op evaluation during your intra-op, it will not carry over into the ASA class for right here, so you need to manually enter this. Monitors, for right here, there is a green circle. This shows where your monitors are associated. Your monitors should always be associated to the room that you are in, and those will be manually associated. If there is a reason why that those monitors did not get associated properly, you could always check on here and see if there is a black X across, or you could hover over this to see if there is the proper monitors associated with your room. Results and orders, if there is any new results that came up for this patient, example blood gases, Those would immediately populate and show an alert window on your bottom right. Power notes, if you wanted to look at any previous power notes that were placed for this patient, example of your pre-op note, you could always click on the power notes just for reference to see if items that were placed on the preoperative anesthesia evaluation. I also want to talk about how to finalize your case. So we're done with our patient. We are taking the monitors off this patient and we want to bring this patient over to recovery. First thing that we would need to do is task, and then we're going to go ahead and suspend the case. The reason why we do have to suspend the case is because we cannot have the same chart open up in two different areas of the hospital. So we're going to ensure that you want to stop charting. This would be yes. Brings you back out to a window that looks like this. But in the time that we're actually done suspending the case, we would bring the patient over to the recovery area. I am going to go ahead and bring up our patient once again into this window. So I'm going to change our start date to March 1st and hit search. You would have the defaulted start date and end date to your present date today, of course, but just for the training, I had to change it to March 1st. So you have brought your patient over to recovery after you suspended. You've given your reports, and you've got a report from the nurse on first set of vitals. You go ahead and find yourself a computer, sign into the intraoperative anesthesia. You would find your patient because in the PACU recovery area, you're going to have all of the listed scheduled cases for the day. So I found my patient, which is 80. I'm going to double click on this patient here. Once again, you will get this window in recovery. You will not get this window in the OR, but since we're in recovery, we're going to go ahead and cancel because we do not need to associate any monitors with this patient. We have received our first set of vitals from the patient. We are going to fill out our emergent form here in recovery. Anything that is applicable for this patient. But also this form can be filled out in the OR. I'm going to execute, and that will immediately place it on my chart. Post-op transfer of care, next form to be filled out. This is our first set of vitals that are required. Anytime you would click here, fill in your details on the right. You cannot tab over on these. These need to be clicked individual. And then as you can see that we do have transferred by me. We do have some pre-filled items out on this list. Once you have filled out this post-op transfer of care, you could go ahead and execute this. As you can see, it's placed onto my chart here. Next down here is anesthesia end time. This would be a time that you would need to verify that you have placed all the proper medications, if there is any other information that you would like to place on this chart. But because once that you have hit your end time, your next step is to finalize your case. Let me go through some of these items down below, because you do have your macro that we placed up top here, and if there was something that you did not see that you wanted to address within your macro, there is many different options here on the bottom. Actions is one of the more popular items to address with patient care. If there's anything about placing an OG tube, warming, temperature probe. Some of the items that you might accidentally delete up top by hitting the red X, you could always retrieve any of those items down below. All medications are also down here. If you needed to see a different medication that you did not see in your macro, two ways once again to view those different kinds of medications. You could check through the medications down below here, or you could also check for the medications up top. It does have a different slightly view to help you out with your medications, and it also on this top icon lets you modify existing medications that you do have, and also lets you remove those medications at the same time. But for purposes, let's just say that we've completed all our medication and everything is correct on our chart. So we are going to go ahead and finalize this chart. I'm going to just remove this since this is an error that was placed on here in our training domain. But we did need to address our estimated blood loss for this patient. Let me go ahead and put it on here. Click onto here and I could place it as an incremental or a total volume. Let me just put on here for 25 for one incremental. And then you can see that it does have the blood loss of 25 on here. Urine output, I will go ahead and put 100 for urine output. And I could place that here. You could do the incremental values on here just like how we did with the CV rhythm. If you clicked every 5 minutes or any area on here, it will default for the show the last how much you've given. But I'm sorry, it doesn't default to the last one. It just shows the total for the incremental. So I could go ahead and hit 25. Shows the 25, and then has our running value here. I'm going to go ahead and finalize this case. Same way that you are suspending the case, which is task. Scroll down to finalize. You will also see that there is a signatures line right here before finalize. All cases need to be signed off by all anesthesia, including CRNAs for the cases. So a signature could be placed anytime throughout the case. So I'm going to go ahead and sign this chart ahead of time. You could also see that I signed my supervisor attestation, but it wasn't required because I did not have a CRNA or resident. So record signatures, sign record. Hit OK, and you can see that my signature is placed there. Go ahead and close this, or if there is others that need to sign the chart, they could do it here too. Go ahead and close. I'm going to place my anesthesia end time by executing that over, and you can see that it executed over to our present time. I'm going to task, and I'm going to finalize this case. This window comes up because it wants to know about how much are we taking credit for on our volume infusions for our 0.9. So I'm going to say that this was a 1,000 bag initially. There is 500 left in this bag, so I am taking credit for 500. You would need to touch any of the check marks here because all of this information will be stopping. I'm going to hit OK. And then now you can see that my top here says no deficiencies. If you did have a deficiency up here, you would need to address that by either going back into your chart and seeing what that deficiency is, or if you could hit the edit button and check on the deficiency for that. Also on here, if you wanted to see that I have a anesthesia start time, it is actually an error within here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these two errors. Let me show you how I can remove those. If I go up to Document, Action, and this is going to show a window for everything that I have done for this case. Anesthesia start time and anesthesia end time. I'm going to go ahead and remove these two. Anesthesia end time and delete. Yes. Anesthesia start time, since this was an error in our train, delete. And yes. So it is going in order of everything that I've done for this case. Also, you could check different categories, completions, and signatures. Go ahead and close. Go back to my task and finalize. And now it shows that I do not have any deficiencies or any missing requirements. It shows that I've already signed my case. And now I could go ahead and finalize. If I did not sign my case, this would be a way that you could sign it right here. If you wanted to print your record, you could check mark here and print it off. So I'm going to go ahead and finalize my case. You will get a screen that looks like this. It looks like the computer screen has broken or froze, but it is not. It is actually just comprising all the data together. Once you have finalized your case, you will see on the top for our case data number for the case, CMC, that it will show finalize. It has removed our screen off on the left here from our to do and completed, and then it will just still show our present start time on here. We cannot change any data on this information unless we unfinalize this case, and it will be the same steps of task and unfinalized case. It will require you to re-sign in. Wanted to go over these top two arrow buttons here. This first arrow button here brings you all the way to the beginning of the case. This is a fake data and just shows when we are in the room. But if you do scroll through, it will bring you to the end of the case here also. You would need to use these buttons if you ever needed to unfinalize a case and then get to the beginning or during the middle of the case to get to that accurate time. The reason why is once you sign in, it's still going to show the yellow present line for the actual time that you are at now, but you needed to go to the date and the time of that case. At this time right now, this concludes the information for this intraoperative anesthesia medical record keeping. If you had any questions, please give our clinical informatics team a call, and that would be at 41CPOE. That's 412763. Thank you very much.